A small game studio in Belgium, drowning in debt, desperately releases an unfinished game just to keep the lights on. Fast forward to today, and that same studio is celebrating the runaway success of one of the most anticipated games of the decade. Sounds like a Hollywood script, right? In this video, we're diving deep into the chaotic, near-death and ultimately triumphant story of Larian Studios. We'll explore how they went from the brink of bankruptcy to creating one of the most successful games of all time. It's a tale of passion, perseverance, and a whole lot of dragons. Our story begins in 1996 in a small office in Ghent, Belgium. A fresh-faced 24-year-old computer science graduate with a passion for gaming decides to start his own studio. And what does he name it? After his dog. That's right, folks. One of the most respected RPG developers in the world is named after a very good boy. Sven and his small team had big dreams. They wanted to create deep, immersive RPGs that would rival the likes of Ultima and Baldurs Gate. But as any indie dev will tell you, having dreams is one thing, funding them is another entirely. Larian's first project, The Lady, the Mage and the Knight, was an ambitious multiplayer RPG. Sven envisioned a game where players could control 3 distinct characters, each with their own storylines and abilities. It was revolutionary for its time, promising a level of interactivity and player choice that was almost unheard of in the late 90s. But after years of development hell and publisher shenanigans, it was unceremoniously cancelled in 1999. The details are a bit murky, but it seems the publisher, Attic Entertainment, demanded increasingly unrealistic changes while failing to provide adequate funding. At one point, they even made Larian throw out everything because the game wasn't 16-bit, as they panicked over the success of Diablo. The cancellation was a crushing blow for the young studio. They'd poured years of work into the project, only to see it vanish. But Sven wasn't about to give up. The team salvaged what they could from their failed project and created Divinity, released in 2002. Divine Divinity was a mix of action RPG elements, like Diablo, and more traditional RPG mechanics. It featured a vast open world, deep story, and Larian's trademark humour. The game was a modest success, earning praise for its deep gameplay and quirky writing. Critics appreciated its blend of accessible action and deep role-playing elements. But here's the thing, despite the positive reviews and decent sales, Larian didn't see a dime of profit. Why? A rookie mistake in contract negotiations. The publishing deal they signed was so unfavourable that even with the game's success, all the money went to the publisher. Lesson learned, always read the fine print, kids. This period was a harsh learning experience for Larian. They had created a well-received game but had nothing to show for it financially. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it taught them a valuable lesson about the business side of game development. Lessons that would serve them very well in the future. The years following Divine Divinity were, to put it mildly, rough. Larian's team shrunk from 30 people to just 3. Imagine going from a bustling office full of creative energy to just 3 people trying to keep a dream alive. The pressure was immense. Sven even took a 2-week holiday to his father's ranch in South Africa, where he spent most of the time staring into the distance, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake with his life choices. It was a moment of existential crisis for the young developer. Had he wasted years chasing an impossible dream? But like any good RPG hero, Sven refused to accept defeat. He returned to Belgium with renewed determination. He convinced a bank and a Belgian broadcaster to fund a children's game called Kick. Think American Idol but with 3D animations. Not exactly the epic fantasy RPG of his dreams, but hey, it kept the lights on. The project was a far cry from the deep RPGs Larian wanted to make, but it taught them valuable skills in 3D animation and game design. More importantly, it provided a steady income that allowed them to work on their true passion projects. This funding allowed Larian to create Beyond Divinity in 2004. The game is a direct sequel to Divine Divinity, featuring a unique twin soul system where the player controlled 2 linked characters. While it wasn't a smash hit, it did just well enough to keep the studio afloat and keep them dreaming of bigger things. Beyond Divinity was a step forward in many ways. It introduced more complex character development systems and a more involved story. However, it's also suffered from bugs and pacing issues, likely due to the tight budget and small team. Critics were mixed, praising the ambition, but noting the technical problems. This period was a testament to Larian's resilience. They were making games they weren't passionate about just to fund the games they wanted to make. It was a grueling time, but it laid the groundwork for their future success. In 2009, Larian thought they'd finally hit the big time with Divinity 2 E Draconus. It was their most ambitious project yet, an action RPG where you can transform into a dragon. The concept was exciting. Players would alternate between on-foot combat and exploration, and dragonflight sections where they could rain fire on their enemies. The game was set to be Larian's breakout hit. They had secured a publisher, expanded their team, and they were ready to take on the big leagues of RPG development. But there was one tiny problem. The game wasn't finished. Due to financial pressures, and remember this was during the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis, Larian's publishers forced them to release the game before it was ready. The global recession had put immense pressure on game publishers, many of whom were facing bankruptcy themselves. They needed games out the door, ready or not. The result? A buggy mess that left both critics and players disappointed. The game was plagued with technical issues, incomplete features, and balance problems. What was meant to be Larian's magnum opus turned into a cautionary tale about the dangers of rushing game development. Reviews were harsh. While many praised the ambition and the core idea, the technical issues were impossible to ignore. Players encountered game-breaking bugs, poor performance, and half-baked systems. The dragon transformation, which was meant to be the game's standout feature, felt underdeveloped and tacked on. Larian found themselves deeper into debt than ever before. The game's poor reception meant sales were far below expectations. Things were so bad, Sven actually stopped paying taxes just to keep development going for an extra month, which we don't recommend. This was perhaps the lowest point in Larian's history. They had poured everything into this game and it had backfired spectacularly. The dream of creating epic RPGs seemed further away than ever. Many studios would have closed their doors at this point. But Larian? They were just getting started. Just when all seemed lost, Sven had an epiphany. What if they could make games without relying on publishers? What if they could go directly to the fans? Enter Kickstarter. In 2013, Larian launched a Kickstarter for Divinity Original Sin. This wasn't just another RPG, it was a return to the studio's roots. They promised a deep, party-based RPG with turn-based combat, a fully interactive world, and co-op play. It was everything Larian had always wanted to make, free from publisher constraints. They asked for $400,000, and it's safe to say they got significantly more than this. It turns out people really wanted a deep party-based RPG with turn-based combat and a reactive world. The campaign was a massive success, showing that there was indeed a market for the kind of games Larian wanted to make. But even with Kickstarter success, things were still tight. Larian had budgeted $1.5 million for the game. They ended up spending $4.5 million, which is slightly over budget. The scope of the game kept growing as they added features and polished existing ones. They were determined to deliver on every promise made during the Kickstarter campaign, and then some. Sven was so desperate to finish the game, he even stopped paying VAT. Again, we don't recommend doing this, just to buy an extra month of development time. It was a huge risk. If the game flopped, Larian would be in an even deeper hole than before. Everything was riding on Original Sin's success. In June 2014, Divinity Original Sin was released, and holy cow, did it pay off. The game sold over 500,000 copies in just a few months, becoming Larian's fastest-selling game ever. Critics loved it, players loved it. Larian, for the first time in their history, were actually making money. Original Sin was praised for its deep, systematic gameplay. Players loved the ability to combine elements to create unique effects, the challenging turn-based combat, and the sheer freedom the game offered. The co-op mode, Separate Waves, was particularly praised as innovative. Critics hailed it as a return to form for computer RPGs. Many noted it captured the spirit of classic RPGs while updating the formula for modern audiences. The game's success proved that there was still a strong market for deep, complex games like this, a market that any major publishers had overlooked. But Larian didn't rest on their laurels. They released an enhanced edition of the game, adding voice acting, a new ending, and countless improvements. This commitment to continually improving their games would become a Larian trademark. It showed that they viewed their relationship with players as ongoing, not ending at the point of sale. The enhanced edition was offered as a free upgrade to all existing owners, a move that earned Larian a lot of goodwill in the gaming community. It also brought the game to consoles, expanding their audience even further. The success was vindication for Sven and the entire Larian team. After years of struggles, near bankruptcies, and compromised visions, they had finally created a game that they wanted to make. and people loved it. With the success of Original Sin, Larian was ready to take things to the next level. Divinity Original Sin 2 was bigger, better, and more ambitious in every way. They had proven the concept with the first game, now it was time to perfect it. The Kickstarter campaign for this one raised over $2 million in just 12 hours. Talk about a level up! This showed the immense goodwill Larian had built with the gaming community. Players trusted them to deliver, and they were eager to see what Larian could do with an even bigger budget. Original Sin 2 expanded on everything that made the first game great. It added new races, a deeper origin system for players, more complex interaction between elements, and a larger world to explore. The game also featured a Game Master mode, allowing players to create their own campaigns, a nod to Larian's love of tabletop RPGs. Not to say development wasn't without its challenges, the team had grown significantly, and managing a larger project came with its own set of problems. But Larian's experience with early access on the first game helped them navigate these waters. They released Act 1 of the game in early access, allowing them to gather feedback and polish the systems before full release. Original Sin 2 was released in 2017 to universal acclaim. It sold over 1 million copies in its first 2 months. Critics called it one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Many praised its intricate systems, branching narrative, and the sheer amount of reactivity in the game world. The game's success catapulted Larian to the top tier of RPG developers. They had gone from the brink of bankruptcy to being one of the most respected studios in the world. It was a stunning turnaround and testament to the power of staying true to your vision. Now here's where things get really interesting. Back in 2012, Larian had actually pitched for the Baldurs Gate 3 license. At the time, Wizards of the Coast was looking for a studio to continue the legendary RPG series. Larian, fresh off the troubled development of Divinity 2, threw their hat in the ring. They were laughed out the room. The owners of D&D thought they were too green to handle such a prestigious IP. It was a humbling moment for Larian, but one that would prove to be ironic in hindsight. Fast forward to 2019, and guess who Wizards of the Coast approached to make Baldurs Gate 3? That's right, Larian Studios. Talk about a comeback story. In the span of 7 years, Larian had gone from being dismissed as too inexperienced to being seen as the only studio capable of doing justice to one of the most beloved RPG franchises of all time. Baldurs Gate 3 was Larian's most ambitious project yet. The budget was estimated at over 100 million, a far cry from the shoestring budgets of their early days. The team grew from 150 people to over 400, and they opened new studios around the world to handle the massive scope of the project. Development of Baldurs Gate 3 was a massive undertaking. Larian had to balance staying true to the D&D rule set, honouring the legacy of the Baldurs Gate series, and incorporating their own unique design and philosophy. They also had to deal with the challenges of developing a huge game during a global pandemic. Once again, Larian turned to early access to refine the game. They released the first act of the game in October 2020, almost a full 3 years before the final release. This long early access period allowed them to gather massive amounts of player feedback, refining and polishing every aspect of the game. And the outcome?
Baldurs Gate 3!
Baldurs Gate 3.
Baldurs Gate 3!
Baldurs Gate 3! Baldurs Gate 3!
Baldurs Gate 3! Having a pretty good night!
Well, unless you've been living under a rock, or maybe in the Underdark, you know that Baldurs Gate 3 has been an unprecedented success. It's won Game of the Year at every major award show. It's sold millions of copies, praised as not being a great game, but a new benchmark for what RPGs can be. The game has been lauded for its incredible depth, its faithful adaptation of D&D rules, its branching narrative, and its cutting-edge graphics. Critics have praised the game's writing, voice acting, and the reaction from the game world. Many have called it one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Baldurs Gate 3 feels like the accumulation of everything Larian has been working towards for the past 25 years. It's a game that could only have been made by a studio with Larian's unique combination of ambition, experience, and willingness to take risks. So what's next for Larian Studios? They've hinted at 2 new RPGs in development, though details are scarce. Given their track record, it's safe to say that whatever they're working on, it's gonna be ambitious. But perhaps more importantly, Larian has become a beacon of hope in an industry often criticised for greed and shortcuts. They've shown that it's possible to make deep, complex games that respect players' intelligence and time. They've proven that you can be financially successful without resorting to exploitive microtransactions or rushed releases. Larian's approach to game development, with long early access periods, constant communication with fans, and a willingness to delay games until they're ready, has set a new standard in the game industry. They've shown that transparency and a genuine passion for gaming can build incredible goodwill with players. In many ways, Larian's story is the ultimate RPG plot. A scrappy underdog facing overwhelming odds perseveres through sheer determination. They've gone from the brink of bankruptcy to the top of the gaming world. The rise of digital distribution and crowdfunding has allowed studios like Larian to bypass traditional publishers and connect directly with their audience. This has enabled the creation of niche, complex games that might have been considered too risky in the past. So as we wrap up this tale, it's worth reflecting on what Larian's journey teaches us. It's a story about perseverance in the face of seemingly great odds. It's about staying true to your vision, even when the entire industry tells you you're wrong. And most of all, it's about the power of passionate creators connecting directly with their audience. Larian didn't just make great games, they changed the way we think about what RPGs can be. They showed that complex, deep games can also be accessible and fun. They proved that players are willing to support ambitious projects if you're transparent and passionate about what you're creating. From a small office in Belgium to the top of the gaming world, Larian's journey is nothing short of incredible. They faced bankruptcy, critical failures, and industry rejection. But through it all, they never lost sight of their goal to create the best RPGs possible. And this story isn't over. No. With new projects on the horizon and a commitment to pushing the boundaries of what games can be, Larian Studios is just getting started. They've set a new standard for what players can expect from RPG games, and it's exciting to think where they'll go next. Larian's success also sends a powerful message to the rest of the industry. It shows that there's still a huge appetite for deep, complex games. It proves that treating your audience with respect and actively incorporating their feedback can lead to incredible results. And it demonstrates that staying true to your creative vision can pay off in the long run. So what do you think? Are you excited to see what Larian does next? Do you have a favourite moment from their games? Let me know in the comments below. And remember that whether you're building a game studio or rolling up a new D&D character, and sometimes the most rewarding adventures, start with a nat 1. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more like this.